Hey guys, Aivi here again, and today I've got a pretty fun new project. I decided that I wanted to recreate the chest that Steven finds in Lion's Mane from the Cartoon Network show Steven Universe. Mind you, of course, this is a jewelry box-sized version, not a full-size treasure chest. So, like usual, I start in Adobe Illustrator to create the vector lines that I'll use to cut the wood using my laser cutter. In order to make these boxes strong and sturdy, I use a notched edge style that lets me slot the pieces together when assembling them. The wood is 1/8 inch thick, so the notches are 1/8 inch thick squares. Here I'm making the planks that will stretch between the two sides, creating the curved lid. I didn't realize it at this point, but I actually screwed this up and reversed the directions the notches should be going in, but I'll fix it later. So for the details on the box, I wanted a second layer of wood. I'll also be using these pieces to obscure the notches along the edges. I knew I'd be using the same 1/8 inch thick wood here, so I planned for an extra 1/8 inch border along all the sides. Okay, so here's an area that I actually improvised on. The chest in the show doesn't actually show the back of it at all, and it's probably safe to assume that there isn't a rose on it, but I wanted there to be at least one bit of imagery on the chest that was undeniably Steven Universe, so I added Rose's rose here. Once all of the primary pieces were created, it was time to lay them out in the most efficient way possible. This is mostly just so that I can use the bare minimum of wood and have as little waste as possible. You can see a whole bunch of half circles laid out here, and you'll be able to see better later how exactly I'm planning to use those. So here we are at my workstation in the garage next to the laser cutter. I've got the file loaded up and imported into the software that I use for my laser cutter. It's called Full Spectrum Retina Engrave because this is a full spectrum laser cutter. Nice little workhorse. Okay, so the problem is that I already cut it, and I forgot to hit the record button. So we're gonna skip that part and go straight to the part where I sand things. So yeah, we're there now. I use a radial hand sander. It's literally one of the cheapest radial hand sanders that they sell at Home Depot. If you do any amount of sanding on a semi-regular basis, it is worth getting one of these things. So you can see the pile of half-circle rims here, and you can see that there's a whole lot of them. So basically, I want raised details on this box, and while it's easy to get raised stuff on the flat bits, it's not nearly so easy on the curved lid. If there's anything that my Harry Potter school trunk chest taught me, it's that creating ribs that are raised from the surface of a curved lid is best done in profile. Of course, the raised bits on the lid are a lot thicker, or they're at least a lot wider than 1/8 inch thick plywood, so I'm planning to make a line of them glued together to make a wider, smoothed band. Now, with all of the various bits sanded, it's time to take it over to my table and start assembling it. I use regular wood glue and I apply it between the notches with a toothpick. I start with the 4 sides of the box and then the bottom. I clamped it to make sure that there were no gaps between the notches while the glue set.
Later.
Now for the lid. I have found that it is very easy to accidentally make these curved lids at a slight slant if I'm not careful. To guarantee that the lid is going to be the right shape and match the shape of the bottom box, I actually start by using blue painter's tape to hold the 2 curved sides directly onto the bottom box. So I was about to start assembling the side beams when I realized quite suddenly that I'd screwed up. So you're going to get to see the laser cutter doing its thing after all. Turns out, when I cut these, I was not thinking, at all. Because that's the wrong end. It needs to be more like that, because the notches on the side things need to fit in these, and not the other way around. So, I'm going to use this piece of scrap and cut the pieces out. And look at that laser cutter go! This is sped up by about 4 times normal speed, just for reference. And I'll cut. Yeah, there we go. That's much more like it. You can see here where I screwed up before. The side pieces have notches that stick out, so the long beams need to have open gaps that those notches can rest in. Alright then, back on track. Here I apply wood glue along the side pieces so that we can put the long beams in place. I put the glue between each of the beams as well, but a lot of them kind of had gaps that were too big for that to do much good, but it really didn't matter. Just keep going until the whole curved top is in place. And now for the details. Putting the front plate of the second layer in place. But I need to clamp it, which means that I need to take the lid off. Now I can clamp. And now for the back. The front and back panels are the exact same width as the base wood. The side pieces are a 1/4 inch wider, 1/8 inch wider on each of the sides, so that they reach to the outer sides of the front panels. While the first side's glue sets, I put this weight on top to hold it flush. Now onto the lid while the base's glue sets. So like the sides on the bottom, the second layer details for the sides up here also extend out 1/8 of an inch all along the top. I need to make sure that it was totally centered before I clamped it. Back to the base. Time to get the last side in place over here. Now that that's done, we're back to the lid. Now it's time to do those half-circle ribs that I mentioned earlier. Apply a little glue to the rib, apply a little glue to the lid along the side piece, put the rib in place, rinse and repeat. And let's do it again for the other side. A long second layer beam stretches across the bottom of the front and the back sides. Clamp them. Okay, so we've got the second layer rims on each of the sides, but the chest in the shell also has one going down the center. So let's find the center of the lid. I used tape cut to the proper length as a guide to make marks along the lid. And now to put on the ribs. This set of ribs is actually a tiny bit different than the other ones, because this has the center beam at the bottom, so these are a little bit shorter. And clamp it.
Later.
Waiting for glue to set is lame. Enjoy my spoiled belly kitty instead. Back to business. Glue has set, time to move on. So the chest in the show has this little cross bit on the front, and I've got to add those in. Quick check with my reference to make sure I figure out where to put them properly. And now to start grinding away with the Dremel. This is the part where I smooth things over and make them flat and consistent. It's also important to make sure the lid and the base continue to line up properly, so I taped them together again and Dremel them all as one unit. Gotta make the front center cross design as smooth and consistent as possible to try and hide how I made it out of multiple pieces. And here's the rose symbol I hid on the back of the chest. Alright, looking good so far. But Dremel alone isn't enough to smooth things as smooth as I want them to be, so it's time to apply wood filler putty. Squeeze out the putty, smooth with a gloved finger. This stuff dries pretty quick, and it's super crumbly when it does. It sands great, but it feels really annoying on your fingers, so I almost always wear gloves. Anywhere that had a seam, apply putty and try to hide it. Whoops, don't want to put any putty in the little holes. And onto the lid. The wood filler will make the biggest difference up here. And time to sand. I hate sanding this stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong, it sands wonderfully and comes out super smooth when you're done. The thing is that it creates so much dust while doing the sanding. It's a huge mess. So the wood filler is still setting on the lid, so let's take a detour on the locking mechanism. I kind of improvised this thing and was trying to keep it as simple as possible so it wouldn't eat up a ton of space on the inside of the box. Looking back, it's fairly flawed, and I'd consider redesigning it for any future revisions. Anyway, the centerpiece is free to move, and it has this hook that holds the lid closed. A partial circle that sits around the centerpiece is going to be glued to the actual box. In order to promote easy turning, I put machine lube in here. I used this stuff on the laser cutter and on my 3D printers, so I figured it was worth using here, even if wood is porous. Still seems to work, so why not? Finally, the lock part is put in place, and the back of it is now glued on. Now I gotta put the lid's latch in place. Gotta figure out where it should go, and gluing it on. Clamp it. So this is my key. It's all kind of a shot in the dark, and I wasn't entirely sure if it would work or not. I had to make a few little adjustments here and there to get it to actually fit and work, but not too much. Testing it out, you can start to see how it's intended to work here. And the last of the wood putty is set, and it's time to sand the lid. Yay, more dust getting everywhere! I took my Dremel in and beveled the edge along the center rib a bit. And more sanding. Let's see how well that lock might work. Still seems like it's gonna work okay. Finally, time to move on to the next phase. Let's paint it! I started by coating the whole thing inside and out with flat black primer. I'll actually leave only this paint for the inside of the chest. And painting the bottom.
Tomorrow.
All of the black paint is done, and it's a day later, so I know it's all set. I'm going to do the outside now, but there are small cracks between these boards, and I don't want any of the exterior paint bleeding onto the inside. Blue tape time! Interior masked. The paint I'm using is coral, and I thought it was a pretty good match for the chest in the show. And on to the bottom. First coat of painting the bottom. Since there are these lips, some of the overhangs prevented the paint from getting everywhere, so it was important to do a second coat on both the top and the bottom pieces at lots of different angles. Okay, base layer is finally done. Time to start masking off the parts that will stay coral, leaving behind only the parts that will become yellow. So up until now, I've been using plain old standard blue painter's tape, but when it comes to masking things that I'm going to be painting, I prefer to use the fancier stuff. This is called Edge Lock, and I believe it's marketed towards use on baseboards, when you're painting your house. It gets a much sharper and cleaner line, and there's a lot less bleeding. Not sponsored. Next up on my handy tools list is this little metal stylus thing. I have no idea what to call it beyond little metal stylus thing, so there you have it. The tips have little rounded balls on them, so it's good for pushing the tape into the corners without tearing it. And, of course, an X-Acto knife for trimming off the tape. I have to apply it very carefully and make sure I'm right up along the edge. Pushing in the corners, trimming off the excess, and do it again. I had to cut around the little cross design in the front. And that's the top part done, but now I need to do the sides. Cutting this out manually would be stupid tedious, so I have another idea. So, for this to work, I need to make masks, and I'm going to cut these out directly with the laser cutter, so they're the exact size and shape that I need. So I'm going to cut this shape, I'm going to cut the inside here, and the inside here and here, which is the same thing, and that guy, and they will be the exact size as the thing that needs to be masked, and I won't have to spend nearly as much time cutting things out with an X-Acto knife. So that's what I'm going to do next. Alright, I've got this really thick tape here, which is exactly 3 inches wide. I used to have some 4-inch tape, but now that's all gone and all I've got left is the 3. I don't actually like this stuff very much. It's not the edge lock kind that I mentioned before, so it's more prone to bleeding on the edges. But at the moment, this is all I've got that's wide enough, so I'm just gonna take the risk and hope it works out. Okay, laser cutter is ready. Here's the file. Big long line of them. Full speed, only 2% power, which is overkill, honestly. I could put it at 0.5 and it will still work just fine. It doesn't exactly take much to cut through tape. Since my honeycomb is covered in char, I don't exactly press the tape down very hard, which is why it curls up like this, but it doesn't cause any problems, honestly, so no worries. And here are our pieces. Ooh, look at that. Perfect fit. Press in the edges, and the other side. Now on to the bottom half. Smooth it out, press in the corners, and again on the side. And oh, look at that! I forgot about that. Damn. So the piece that I cut out for the back didn't have the rose cut into it. Back to the laser cutter. Alright, take 2. And now we can put it in place. But of course it doesn't fit perfectly. Why would it fit perfectly? I cut it up a bit, and I got it in place. And done. And at this point, I went ahead and did some light sanding over everything before I put on the coat of paint. And now back to the painting station. This time we're doing a yellow trim. I've got this pretty light yellow and it looked like a good match. Rinse and repeat on the base. I ended up doing a couple coats for both pieces here too, just to make sure that I got all of the overhang bits and that there was a nice even coat on everything. Paint done. Time to peel off the masking tape. And here it is. I ended up going in with a paintbrush and I painted some more details on the rose in the back, but of course, I forgot to hit the record button again, cause yay. Anyway, we've come a long way, but we ain't done yet. Time to assemble the hardware, and I'll start with the hinges. Hey, look who's got 2 thumbs and didn't check their camera angle. I'm a Hufflepuff! Not really, but yeah, didn't get a good shot here, sorry. Anyway, hinges on, it's time to test the lock. Well, it works. Moving on. I want to put handles on each of these sides, and I've got these, but I need them to be yellow to match the trim, so off to paint. And done. I also painted a set of screws so that they wouldn't look weird and be a different color. So I modified the key so that it can be hooked on the side and attached to the chest like this. Now to paint the key, because plain wood is lame and it doesn't match. And painting the backside. Right, now back to the thing I was doing before I got distracted, the handles. Mark where the screws will go, drill in 2 small holes with my Dremel, and screw them in. So next I decided to go one step further and add some accents. I added these little pink rhinestones to all of the places where the rivets were shown on the chest. I applied a little super glue just to make sure they'd stay in place because I don't trust the little adhesive that comes on the back of the stones. And that's it! Well, okay, not 100%. I went back and I hand painted the hinges yellow because they stuck out like crazy, but I forgot to record that, so moving on again. Overall, I'm actually really happy with it. The weakest part is that lock. The part that sits on the inside of the lid should be higher up so that it catches better. Right now, when you lift the lid, you can open a tiny bit, and it would be like super easy to stick a toothpick in there and slide it open, and then that's not a very secure lock. But also, not a very great lock, just because you can't remove the key after you've unlocked it. I mean, you put the key in, you turn it, and you can open it, but the key doesn't come out. You have to relock it before the key can come out. So, yeah, it's a little janky, whatever. Anyway, it's done, and it's gonna be on my Etsy shop. Or, it will be once I get the lock figured out. If it's not there and you really want one, send me a message through Etsy and I can get it listed for you. All in all, this was a pretty fun experience. I think its design came out really good, and I'm definitely getting a better handle on how to make these curved lid chest things. I think every one of them that I make turns out a little bit better, which is awesome. If you've got any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down in the doobly-doo. If you've got an idea for the next thing I should make, go ahead and, put it in the comments. If you liked the video, I would super duper appreciate it if you would like and maybe share it with people that might also like it, because, no one watches these, and I'm kind of like talking into the void, and yeah, that's a thing. But anyway, I'm having fun, and I hope you're having fun, and I hope you enjoyed the video. That is all I've got to say today. I hope you have a great day, and don't forget to be awesome. Bye-bye.